So the convicted felon, insurrectionist, dirtbag president has just been smacked down hard by a federal judge who he appointed. Just gets better and better, doesn't it? Anyway, this has to do with Donald Trump illegally invoking the Alien Enemies Act to essentially kidnap people off the streets of America and deport them, not really deport, rendition them to essentially a concentration camp in El Salvador. Now, this ruling came down a couple of days ago, but I've had a hell of a week and I haven't been able to get to it. But this is a legal issue that I've been covering for several weeks, so I wanted to make sure that I covered it here. Now, I've got an article here from ABC News. I want to read some select portions of this article to you, and we'll discuss along the way. But this is a powerful opinion written by this Trump-appointed judge, and it really lays bare the fact that Donald Trump does not have a legal leg to stand on as he is invoking the Alien Enemies Act. It's absurd on its face. I mean, the only judges in the entire federal system that I can see possibly saying that Trump does have authority to invoke this act you'd have to be as corrupt and or stupid as Judge Aileen Cannon down in Florida, that corrupt hack of a judge who went so far as to dismiss the slam dunk stolen documents case. By the way, if Trump had not been reelected by the American people, that case where she dismissed it, that would have been reinstated on appeal. She would have lost, and there was a good chance that at that point the appellate court would have removed her altogether from the case. But since the American people are breathtakingly stupid, at least enough of them who voted in the last election, they elected the criminal, and so he's never gonna face justice for those crimes. But keeping hope alive as I do, and as I want to see this man be one day put on trial, convicted, and sentenced to prison, the good thing is, well, it's good and bad, but to the end of putting his orange ass in prison, the good thing is that he is committing new crimes on a nearly daily basis, many of which he enjoys no immunity whatsoever, even given that horrible Supreme Court decision. Okay, I'm getting way too far afield here. Let me get to this ABC article. Here's the headline. Judge in Texas of all places, rules Trump's use of Alien Enemies Act for deportations, quote, exceeds the scope of the law. A Trump-appointed federal judge has permanently blocked the Trump administration from detaining, transferring, or removing Venezuelans targeted for deportation under the Alien Enemies Act in the Southern District of Texas, ruling that the administration's invocation of the AEA, the Alien Enemies Act, I have a hard time saying that, exceeds the scope of the law. In a 36-page opinion, Judge Rodriguez concluded that Trump's March 15th invocation of the, let's try it again, Alien Enemies Act is unlawful and exceeds the scope of the centuries-old wartime law that allows the president to deport non-citizens with little to no due process during an invasion or predatory incursion. Quote, the president cannot summarily declare that a foreign nation or government has threatened or perpetrated an invasion or predatory incursion of the United States. Because as we know here, that this act from 1798 or 1789 only can be invoked by a president in times of war. War declared by Congress, since it is only Congress who has the authority to declare war. And we are in no declared war. The only other circumstances under which a president can invoke the powers given to him under this law are if we are under invasion. Even if we're not at war, we are under invasion by a foreign government, or there is a predatory incursion into the United States by forces sent by a foreign nation. None of those circumstances are even arguably present in this situation. So on its face, Trump's legal position is absurd. Anyways, let me continue with this article just a little bit. Judge Rodriguez, in his ruling, also pushed back against the Trump administration's claim that the president's use of the Alien Enemies Act should not be reviewed by courts. Quote, allowing the president to unilaterally define the conditions when he may invoke the AEA and then summarily declare that those conditions exist would remove all limitations to the executive branch's authority under the AEA and would strip the courts of their traditional role of interpreting congressional statutes to determine whether a government official has exceeded the statute's scope. The law does not support such a position. Another thing to keep in mind with all of this is not just a simple question of whether or not Trump is exceeding the scope of his authority. He is. The question is not simply whether he is illegally invoking this act, which he clearly is. This is also a fundamental violation of separation of powers, the most basic principle of our Constitution. That being the idea, which is the basis upon which our Constitution was constructed, that in order to prevent the accumulation of power in a single person or branch of government, we are going to separate out the three main functions of government. That is, writing the laws, executing the laws, and then resolving cases and controversies that arise under the law, right? So Congress has the power to write law. The president has the power to execute, enforce the law. And the courts have the power to interpret the law in order to resolve cases and controversies that arise under the law. Now, what Donald Trump is doing here, he is seeking to usurp the power of the judicial branch. He's saying that the courts have no authority to say what the law is. The courts have no authority to determine whether or not the Alien Enemies Act is appropriately invoked here. He is taking the judicial power for himself in clear violation of the most basic principle of our Constitution. It is a flagrant violation of separation of powers. And I remember it wasn't so long ago that Republicans at least pretended to care about such things. We know they no longer do. Is there any more of this article that I need to read? No, I don't think so. But here's the question that arises from all of this. Because in striking this down, by the way, this ruling only applies to this one particular judicial district. It doesn't apply nationwide. But there are other cases. Why am I itchy here? There are other cases challenging Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act in other judicial districts around the country. And we're probably going to see the exact same outcome. They're going to strike this down because it is so obvious. I mean, it's really not debatable. So if a judge comes out the other way and upholds Trump's use of the invocation of this law, you know that person is a corrupt hack. Because it's really inarguable. But anyway, so it only applies to that judicial district, and it only applies to deportations. I'll use that term loosely. Deportations pursuant to his invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. It does not stop regular deportations, that is legal deportations under the Immigration and Naturalization Act. Those deportations, legal deportation, can continue. This just applies to the Alien Enemies Act deportations. So because that's the case, and because Donald Trump already had full authority to deport people under existing law, without having to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, the question is, why the hell would he do this? Because even the people, most of them, who he has essentially kidnapped and sent out of the country, renditioned to, third-party country prison camps without any due process whatsoever, most of those people, if not all of them, and we don't know for sure because there's been no due process, but most of them would probably still be deported if he just did it the legal way, right? So this whole Abrego Garcia thing, look, I don't know what the truth about him is. I'm certainly not going to take this corrupt regime's word for it. But all indications are he's probably deportable. And so if he had just given him an immigration hearing, as is required by law, he may very well have been found deportable by a judge and legally deported a long time ago. And we wouldn't even be fighting over this. So why is Trump invoking the Alien Enemies Act in order to do something that he could do legally? That is, deport these people. Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. First is, I think he wants to pick fights. He wants this to be in the news. Because remember, with Donald Trump, so much of it is smoke and mirrors. So much of it, of what he does, is distraction. And he thinks that anything related to immigration is a winning issue for him. I think he's overplaying that hand. And the polls are beginning to show that he is losing support. In fact, the polls show he's underwater now on the issue of immigration. I think largely because of the way he's done this so brazenly illegally. But anyway, I think one of the reasons he's doing this is to take the focus off of all these other illegal things that he's doing. He wants to be arguing about illegal immigration and deportations because he thinks that's a winning issue. Also, it keeps you from, talking about the grift that he has with his meme coin or all these other violations of law and what Doge is doing, all this other stuff that is horribly unpopular. He doesn't want you talking about that. He wants us talking about this. So he thinks picking this fight benefits him politically and keeps the focus off of things he doesn't want us talking about. But the other thing is, and this is the much more insidious thing, is that I think he's invoked this because it allows him to arrest people, essentially kidnap people, because they're not doing this pursuant to any warrant. They're just doing it because Trump said so. He snatches these people off of the streets of America, holds them before, in a detention facility somewhere, whisks them out of the district. And by the way, they're moving these people around from district to district so that cases can't be filed, because the Supreme Court said the only way to challenge these detentions is to file a habeas petition in the district where they're being held. And so they keep moving them so that the lawyers for these people can't catch up and can't file a habeas petition in the right judicial district. They do that until they can send him out of the country completely to his buddy Bukele in El Salvador. And so what I think he's trying to do here is lay the foundation for doing this to American citizens. Because what he's saying here in all of this is that I have authority just by saying that someone is an illegal alien. I can then deprive them of all rights. All I have to do is say they are an illegal alien. Then I can arrest them without a warrant, hold them without a hearing, and send them off to a concentration camp in another country, and then tell the courts, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't even get them back because they're not in my custody anymore. If he can get away with doing that to supposedly illegal aliens, then there is no reason why he cannot get away with doing that to legal residents or even American citizens. Because all he has to do is say they're illegal and there's no due process. So if he does it to someone who is in fact an American citizen, if he gets away with this, then that American citizen never even has the opportunity to go to court, to prove that they're an American citizen, to prove that they're innocent, to prove that Trump has no authority to do to them what he's doing. That's how important this is. And we know that Trump does want to do this to American citizens. We got that video from the Oval Office that was not intended to be videotaped, where Donald Trump was talking to Bukele in the Oval Office and said, you need to build more of these prisons. You need at least 5 more, because next we're going to start sending you American citizens. What he said was, next we're going to start sending you the homegrown, meaning American citizens. If he gets away with doing this to people he says are not here legally, then he can get away with doing it to everyone. This is not hyperbole. This is the logical next step based off what he's doing and what he says he wants to do. That's how serious this is. Anyway, this case, or this ruling by this Trump-appointed federal judge, one more thing about that. This is more evidence that not everyone who Trump appointed in his first term is a bootlicking political hack who will violate the law and the Constitution in order to make Donald Trump a dictator. In fact, my guess is probably most of the people that he appointed are decent judges who will follow the law and the Constitution. But we know also for a fact that some of them are indeed corrupt political hacks, like Judge Aileen Cannon. But what is also important to remember, since the American people, again, in their infinite wisdom, gave him a second term in office, he's not going to make the mistake of appointing people who will follow the law and the Constitution. So any judges, it would be a safe bet to assume that any judges he appoints or he nominates from here on out will be in the mold of Aileen Cannon. They will be corrupt political hacks, or they will not get the nomination. That is the single test that he will apply to these people. Will you do my bidding from the bench, or will you not? And if I don't have a guarantee that you will, then I'm not going to nominate you. So things are going to get much, much worse. But this ruling by this judge, Judge Fernandez Rodriguez in the Southern District of Texas, is an excellent ruling, and I do think this is the model for rulings that judges around the country will follow when confronting this issue of Trump's illegal invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. But this is ultimately going to make its way to the Supreme Court. And even there, I believe that Donald Trump is going to lose, because this is not even a close case at all. And for the Supreme Court to rule in Trump's favor here would be for them to they might as well just come out and say, we are no longer an independent court. We work for Donald Trump. We are his rubber stamp. And at least so far, the court, even given all its horrible rulings up to this point, it still has not proven that they are that corrupt. They are that in Donald Trump's pocket, because they've already ruled against him. This Supreme Court, in this second term, a few times. And importantly, in a case having to do with the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. Now, they didn't pass yet on the constitutionality of this. They ruled on a procedural matter related to this, but they are going to be ruling on this case. We'll look to see what they'll do. I'm not, I wouldn't be completely surprised if they ruled in Trump's favor, because, there is reason to worry about this court. Actually, I would be pretty darn surprised. Maybe not entirely, but I would be pretty damn surprised. This case is just so flagrant an abuse of power and a violation of not only this statute, but basic separation of powers that I do not think that they're going to rule in Trump's favor. Anyway, just a little bit of good news. We've got to take it where we can get it right now, and this is an example of good news. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll talk to you again soon.